once. All right, there we go. Just waiting for that to come up. Give me 1 second. And we will begin as soon as this. Hold on 1 second. Just waiting for that to come up. Give me 1 second. And we will begin as soon as this. Okay, so it looks like everything is good to go on my end. Let me see something right quick. Okay, so it looks like everything is good. Yeah. So if you can hear me now, because I'm using a new mic today. If you can hear me now, just let me know. Let me. I'm actually putting something into the YouTube chat. Tell me. All right. So, and actually, let me before I begin, let me actually put it into the Periscope chat as well. All right. So yeah, we're gonna go ahead and get started in 1 second. I just want to do a few things on my end on Twitter. We have like an incredible discussion, or at least I have an incredible discussion that I want to engage in today. And it's something that I've been building on. It's a concept that I've been building on for a while now. Hold on. All right, so yeah, here's the the trajectory for what I want to talk about today. Today, as you can see on the screen, okay, I'm going to have a discussion about um, social dominance theory, which is an aspect of social psychology, white fragility, and black population control. And I'm going to talk about it in the context of some of the recent stories that have been going on, which I actually wrote about on my blog, blackintellectual.com. It's the most recent article that's out there. It's called "White Yale Student Calls the Police on Black Student for the Dumbest Reason." And it's that article is not just about what happened at Yale. It's also about all of these things that have been going on. Hold on, hold on 1 second before I continue. I think I'm gonna have to get rid of one of these streams. All right, so yeah, so let's get started. Now, today I had every intention of continuing with the system of slavery discussion that I began last week. And that video, I've gotten some good feedback from that video. But due to time constraints and making prior engagements with people in the real world, because I was actually going to talk about the topic of today, which you see scrolling on the video, and then I was going to actually continue with that discussion. The system of slavery part 2. This is going to be like a 3-hour broadcast, but I'm actually going to end up cutting that down to like 1 hour. So we need to have a discussion, everyone, about the situation we are presently in. All right. The situation we are presently in. We are in a moment in time when we are being attacked and society doesn't have a problem with it. Okay, and this is something that has been ongoing for quite some time. We all know that, but I think we're seeing it now with through a different lens, because there are there are some clashes with uh, a lot of preconceived notions. There are some clashes with these preconceived notions about where we are as a society that's not gelling with what we are actually seeing in the real world. So many people think, this is my perception. Many people, I think, are simply indifferent to what's going on right now. People want to go on with their lives and have the privilege to be able to say, well, that's not happening to me, so it's not my problem. People are comfortable. People are very comfortable right now in the United States. I don't know why. Because there are a lot of things that are not. Hold on one second. My stream keeps freezing. Hold on, I'm still here. I'm just checking a few things out on the back end in terms of certain things that I can do to kind of get my stream to work a little bit better. Give me one second, because it's like stopping and starting a lot. So I might have too many. I have a lot of articles open up on my computer, and I think I just need to go about closing some of this stuff. All right, so maybe that'll improve it. So let me continue. So, yeah, so people have this thing where they want to be able to go about their lives without actually engaging with what's going on. And this is why white America and black America have had radically different interpretations of police brutality, racism, state violence, protesting, activism, all of these things for years. And the polling bears this out. The majority of black people and the majority of white people just are not on the same page ideologically about what we are faced with right now. Okay, what's actually going on in America? We see this in the overall up up the overall up how I'm messing this word up. Never mind. We see this in the overall denial. That's basically what I'm trying to say. The denial of black issues and the shadowing of these issues by calling it identity politics, quote unquote. So you wonder why a bunch of people are silent when the police state attacks the black community, as it has been for decades now. Okay? Well, now we have a new problem, which is really an old problem that is simply now being caught on camera. And that is how regular, average, plain Jane white Americans have this thing where they want to call the police on black people who they are simply annoyed or mildly threatened by. Okay, and this is a problem. There have been more than a few of these incidents recently, many of them in the month of April, of this such thing, of this very dynamic. But again, like I said, this has been going on for a long time. 2 days ago, like I said, I wrote an article on my blog, Black and Intellectual, about this topic. That's what I referenced at the beginning of the stream, because I knew I was going to have to talk about this today. Okay, it's specifically about the incident at Yale, which I'm going to go into in a second. But the article, which is in the description box on YouTube, is also about recent incidents as a group, as a collection. And this is about the article is about how this is really an aspect of social domination and control. Okay, which is an element of this problem that I don't really see a whole lot of people talking about. Okay, calling the police on black people because you don't think they belong. Okay, whether when they're barbecuing outside in Oakland, California recently, or sleeping in the common area of a dorm hall at Yale University. Okay, regardless of the way in which you don't think black people belong, okay, when you really narrow it down, we're talking about control and the way to dominate black people through police by proxy. Okay, so let's be real. Most people know law enforcement because this has been going on for a long time publicly. So most people know that law enforcement attacks black people harder than they attack white people, because of all of these high-profile police brutality cases that have been going on for years now. Okay, going all the way back to Ferguson. Okay, even though people might not look at all of these stories like in terms of like the minutia, they might not look at the details. They might not be reading all of these 2, 3, 4,000 word articles that get written on these topics, but they are still occurring in the public. People still know about this stuff that's going on publicly because people are talking about it on social media. People aren't living under that much of a rock. Okay, so when you allow, as a society, when you allow police to harm black people with such regularity and you aren't doing anything about it, you are reinforcing a certain social hierarchy. You're reinforcing a certain social dynamic. Okay? And that's what I want to get into today. So before I continue, let me tweet out a few things like I usually do, just so everyone knows that I'm live. And we are going to get down into it. I really like this new mic that I have, by the way. I still have my old mic, and that still works perfectly fine, but I don't always like how my voice comes through. My voice comes through as, I don't know, it's not always as clear as I want it to be. So hopefully this new mic will sound a lot better. Alright, so yeah. So everything looks good, everything sounds good. So I want to first talk about what happened at Waffle House. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, which one? You know, there's been a few incidents at Waffle House recently, but I'm specifically going to talk today about the incident that happened with a man or a kid by the name of a teenager by the name of Anthony Wall, and this happened on May 4th. So this happened fairly recently, a little over a week ago, and we've all seen the video on YouTube. Sean King has been keeping track of a lot of this stuff. You can really just go to his profile, or really anybody's profile that's been talking about a lot of these things recently. And a lot of people have seen the video. It's the video of that huge police officer, the white police officer, really large man, choking the life out of Anthony Wall, who is much smaller than he is. And he has him pinned up against the window of Waffle House, and he ends up throwing him to the ground. And you can see the people who are recording the incident, they're like, that's not how this is supposed to be handled. And obviously this is a clear case of excessive force, right? But my issue is with the mayor of Warsaw. Okay, because everybody already knows that the incident itself is problematic, but we also have to look at how people in positions of power, who we elect, okay, we also have to see how these people react to these incidents, because oftentimes what you'll notice is that people get protected. These agents of state and racial violence, which in the past I've called ASRVs, they get protected. There's this whole mechanism in place where the mayors, the prosecutors, everybody sort of starts reading from a script, and everybody gets on the same page. So the mayor of Warsaw, who is a black man, by the way, and recently elected too, is tap dancing hard for this police officer. Okay, there's a video that I was going to play, but honestly, I think it's going to mess up my audio. The link is in the description box. And in the video, you can just tell that this guy is reading from a script. Okay, you can tell that he's reading from a script. And at the beginning of the video, he says Anthony Wall, quote, became disruptive. Okay, and brought an issue which called for an arrest. Okay, then he says that the officer showed up at the scene and Anthony Wall was irate. Now, of course, check this out. And honestly, watch that video that I have linked in the description box so that you can know what I'm talking about. I'm not going to play the video because I'm using a new microphone, and I should have tested all of this stuff before I went live, which is why I'm like stopping and starting a lot, because I need to make sure that I'm being heard properly. I mean, I need to make sure that the stream is streaming properly. So I don't, there's some things that I have to work with on the back end. So I'm not going to play the video, but just we have to be mindful about how they use certain words to back up their position, because obviously when they go about protecting these cops who use excessive force or cops that murder people, it immediately becomes about blaming the victim and dragging the name of the victim through the mud. Okay, so the mayor is saying that Anthony Wall became disruptive and brought an issue which called for an arrest. What is this issue? We don't know, because he doesn't actually say. Okay, then he says the Anthony Wall became irate. What does that mean? Was he just raising his voice? So if that's what he means, raising your voice does not justify that excessive use of force that we saw in that video that went viral at Waffle House. Okay, irate how? Okay. Word usage is very important because this is how they frame the narrative. Then he went on to say Wall was, quote, threatening employees. Again, if we think about what they said about Chiquisha Clemens a few weeks ago, they tried to make a lot of the same arguments where they tried to spin it as, oh, well, she was doing something that was a threat to the employee, and that's why the employee called the police. When really, according to eyewitnesses and according to Clemens herself, she was just asking basic questions. Why do I need to pay 50 cents for plastic utensils? We all know most of that stuff is just given out for free when you go to a lot of these restaurants. They're not, most of the time they don't ask you to pay anything for that. So so she was justified in saying, no, and then she asked for the corporate number. She wanted the number to the corporate offices. So because you have a black woman or a black man demanding a certain thing from an employee, that becomes a quote-unquote threatening employees when they start spinning this stuff in the media. Okay, so when they start using these very vague words to describe why the police were called in the first place, all our red flags need to go up, because they'll say anything to justify police brutality. So the officer wanted him, and again, the mayor, this black mayor of Warsaw, starts saying in this video, and the video is on newsobserver.com. He starts saying there was a struggle. There was a struggle between the police officer and Anthony Wall once the police officer got on the scene. And this is kind of when I think the video that we've all seen on social media, on Twitter and on Facebook, this is when I think people started recording, because people started saying, oh no, something is about to go down. So the mayor of Warsaw is like, yeah, there was a struggle, and because Anthony Wall was, quote, threatening employees and quote, being irate and becoming disruptive. So there was a struggle, and they're trying to spin it as this is a struggle that Anthony Wall brought onto himself. So all of those things are supposed to be, according to this mayor, supposed to be a justification for why Anthony Wall was assaulted after leaving a prom or going to a prom. I'm not sure if he was going to a prom and he hadn't got there yet and they had just stopped at Waffle House, or if they had already left their prom, but he was with his sister. And they were both in prom outfits. And they were both in tuxedo. Well, he was in a tuxedo. Okay, so then halfway through the video, the mayor starts changing up his logic and starts changing up his words. And he says that the officer was called because there was a fight that Anthony Wall had been in, and he said that Anthony Wall had broken the law. So this is when it starts getting kind of weird, because that's not what he said at first. At the beginning of this video, if you go to newsobserver.com, which like I said, is linked in the description box on the YouTube video of the live stream right now, okay, he made no mention of a fight. So halfway through the video, he's now, and you can even see the mayor of Warsaw, you can even see his eyes going back and forth. It's literally like this dude is reading from a script. Okay, where he was told, because I'm telling y'all this right now. This is what the police are saying. This is the point of what I'm trying to get to. The mayor of Warsaw is reading from a script that it was given to him by the police. And so this is what the police are running with. This is their cover story, and they're telling the mayor of Warsaw, this is what you need to go out there and say to the public. Alright, so halfway through this video, the mayor of Warsaw, who's going about defending the actions of the police officer, which Waffle House is also doing, by the way, which is why I agree with Bernice King and some other activists that there needs to be a boycott of Waffle House. We no longer need to be giving our money to Waffle House. And I said this on Twitter. Everything that you can get from Waffle House, from the omelets to the scrambled eggs to the waffles to the bacon and eggs. Well, I already said eggs. To the bacon and the sausage links. All of that stuff you can make yourself at your house. And if you really want to buy it that bad, pay a black person to make that stuff for you. Say, find a black. We know people people talk about, and I know I'm getting off topic, but people talk about circling our dollars and things like that, and giving money to other black people. If you don't want to pay for this stuff yourself, don't give this money to Waffle House, who defends these actions of police brutality against black people. Say to yourself, grandmother, grandfather, mother, brother, whoever is in your family, cousin, aunt, uncle, whoever is in your family who you know can cook, tell them, hey, I will pay you $10, I will pay you $20 to make this stuff for me if you don't want to make it that bad yourself. If you know one of your family members makes a bad omelet, and when I say bad, I'm talking about good. When you know they make a badass omelet and that mess is always banging and it's always good every time you eat it, pay them to make it if you don't want to make it yourself. Or make it yourself in your own house. Buy the ingredients from your local grocery store and make your own omelets. Make your own scrambled eggs. We don't need to be paying Waffle House to double down on these things that are occurring within their own buildings, and they're not doing a damn thing about it. And honestly, I had a problem with Starbucks. If you go back and watch my video about Starbucks, I had a problem with Starbucks and their response, but their response in comparison to the response from Waffle House is like night and day. Starbucks' response is way better than the response from Waffle House. Starbucks is at least going about, even though the solutions that they're throwing out there are, in my opinion, not really going to do anything, they're at least going about trying to be sympathetic, trying to understand the racial dynamic of what's going on here. Waffle House doesn't really seem to give a crap. That's just my perception. All right. Give me 1 second, and I'm gonna continue because I definitely went off on a tangent. Hold on 1 second. I'm pulling something up. They're at least going about. All right, so let me continue. So yeah. So the mayor changed his story up, and I think it's not only to defend the cops, it's to defend corporate interests as well. It's also an element of this is also about defending Waffle House. I'm not saying Waffle House is paying them, but they always get into the act of defending corporate interests. Okay, that's a lot. A lot of these politicians are engaged in that, and we need to get people like this mayor. And what is this guy's name, by the way? I didn't write it down in my notes. What is the name of the mayor of Warsaw, North Carolina? I'm looking it up right now on Google because I didn't actually write it down. What is his name? Russell Eason. That's his name. Russell Eason. Let me make sure that's correct. Make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Yeah. Yep, that's him. Russell Eason. So yeah, Mayor Russell Eason of Warsaw, North Carolina, started, like I said, was saying he halfway through this video, he's changing it up, and now they're accusing Anthony Wall of breaking a law, of getting into some sort of fight. Funny, he has nothing to say about that fight earlier in the video. At first, in the beginning of the video, he simply said that Wall brought an issue which called for an arrest and became disruptive. But becoming disruptive is not the same as starting a fight. So when he says that there was a fight, is he talking about just a verbal altercation? Yeah, so they're being very, very funny style with this case in North Carolina. So now they're accusing him of breaking the law, but check this out: if they don't actually end up pressing charges against the black 17-year-old, the black guy in the video, the viral video from Waffle House who was getting choked, against the window by the cop, by that huge cop, Anthony Wall, if they don't actually bring charges against him, then all of this stuff is just BS. Everything this mayor is saying is absolutely BS, and they don't have a legal leg to stand on. And all of this stuff he's saying is basically political protection that they are giving to the Warsaw Police Department. Okay, so the point of this video, the video that I'm referencing, the point of that whole video is to use a black mayor to give political cover to a white cop who physically assaulted a black man on prom night. Okay, when we see these same agents of the state coddle white mass murderers like Dylan Roof. So let's give the mayor the benefit of the doubt. Let's say Anthony Wall, who was getting choked out, let's say he actually did start a physical fist fight. Okay? That's still that the reaction is still asymmetrical from the agents of the state, from cops. The reactions are still asymmetrical. Why are white mass murderers coddled after they kill people? They kill scores of people. They are coddled. You don't see Dylan Roof getting choked out. You don't see the killer in from the school shooting in Florida, you don't see him getting choked out. But, you know, a black person who supposedly is starting a fight and causing a disruption, quote unquote, that's a justified reason to do everything you saw being done to him in that video. I'm calling BS on all of this. Then, of course, halfway through the video, he says, this is not a racial issue. That's me personally. That's when I cut the video off. I said, you know what? I'm not watching the rest of this. Because I can already see what his whole tap dancing agenda is all about. Black people, we have got to get some radically minded fighters into these political positions of power. All of these pro-establishment, go along to get along blacks who don't want to rock the boat, that mess is not saving anybody. This is why it's so important to be politically engaged and to be politically active. And to say that it's not just important to have black people in power, it's important to have black people who think like us. Black people who are progressive, black people who are radical, and black people who are going to challenge the status quos and challenge the hierarchies, the social hierarchies of America. Because black people who are going to get into positions of power and not challenge those social hierarchies, not challenge those social norms, they are by default defending those norms and defending those systems. So when they're backed into a corner, they're going to do what this black mayor of Warsaw, North Carolina is currently engaged in right now, and that is defending Waffle House. That is defending police brutality. That is coming out saying this is not a racial issue when we know they do not treat white people the same way. That is what is going on right now in America. So that was the Waffle House incident. And then I want to talk about the incident at Yale. Okay, this is what I partially wrote about in the article that is up right now on blackandintellectual.com. And for those that might have missed it earlier in the broadcast, in the stream, the title of the article is "White Yale Student Calls the Police on Black Student for the Dumbest Reason." All right. So let me read this article to you that I wrote. One of the many problems with covering up the murder of innocent black people in America is the green light that it gives not only to other corrupt cops and people who want to be corrupt cops because they see that they can get away with it, but the green light it also gives to random ass citizens. And as I'm going to explain as I go along with this stream, this is an aspect of social domination and social control. Okay, calling the police on black people that annoy you has been weaponized by certain Americans. Every other day there seems to be a new incident. So on May 9th, on the campus of Yale University, you know, everyone knows Yale University, one of the most well-known Ivy League institutions in the country, really honestly in the world. A white woman called the police on a black woman named Lalonde Siyanbola. Okay, so Siyanbola is a graduate student at Yale who actually stays on campus. She has keys and everything. As you see, this video has also been trending on social media. Just like the video from Waffle House of Anthony Wall being choked out, that video went viral. So this video also went viral because Siyanbola was alert enough to record what was going on social media, and she actually went live on Facebook. So you can also see this video as well if you haven't seen it already. So she fell asleep in the common area of the residence hall while researching a paper. She's a grad student. You know, she has a lot of research to do. It was late, so she fell asleep. So the white woman, whose name is Sarah Brash, if I'm pronouncing it right. She can be seen on camera on Facebook Live standing what looks like her the doorway of her dorm room. Okay? And she can be heard saying, quote, that common room or the common room is not for sleeping. So I guess that's supposed to be some asinine justification for calling the police, which is what she actually did. Which we already know, which is the whole point of this live stream. We already know, and society, people in society already knows that police interactions with black people can turn violent, if not deadly. So it's extremely problematic that you're seeing people with such regularity calling the police on black people for very mild things that the police should not be getting called on. And it's also come out that this is not the first time that this particular woman, Sarah Brash, has called the police on black people because she felt uncomfortable. There was an incident also, that a previous incident. This is what leads me to believe that this was premeditated, and that this is not an example of implicit bias. This had to be explicit. This had to be conscious, because Sarah Brash has previous engagements, negative engagements, with Lolade Ciambola from I think back in February. So back in February, Ciambola was with, I think, 3 other students, and they were in the common area, just doing some meeting and talking about schoolwork and things like that. And one of Ciambola's associates, I think he got lost or something like that, so he was walking around the dorm area, and Sarah Brash, this previous incident back in February, she said that she felt uncomfortable again, and so told I think it was a black male associate of Ciambola's, told this associate of hers that he didn't belong there. So she called the police, from that previous incident. And the police came and had to have this whole discussion with the black people who stayed on campus and the black people who go to Yale University, because one white woman felt uncomfortable and didn't think that they belonged there. So Sarah Brash is familiar with Lolade Ciambola. This is not her first interaction with her. And I don't know if that's really come out in the media like that. But that's actually what I came across during my research. And they actually ended up. What's interesting is Ciambola and the black guy that Sarah Brash called the police on after she saw him wandering around the dorm hall. They filed a complaint against her. So they have an active, open complaint against Sarah Brash, and she just called the police on Ciambola again. So I personally think this was premeditated. Well, maybe not premeditated, but it was definitely conscious. This was not something that was unconscious, No, I'm not buying that. I'm not buying the implicit bias argument. Not in this regard. So, something else about Sarah Brash that has come out. All right. Some old blog articles have come out that she wrote in the past, where we now see that she has some very problematic political views. Okay, she has some very, very problematic political views. Hold on one second. Let me continue sharing this stream, as I have to do. Just so everybody knows that I'm live. All right, so hold on one second. Just so All right, so yeah, let me continue. So in the past, the Griot was reporting this. They have an article that I actually linked to in the article that I wrote on Black and Intellectual. She made arguments in defense of slavery for a middle school debate. Now, some people might be like, okay, that happened back in middle school. Okay, but in a 2010 blog post, she actually doubles down on those arguments based on the notion that, quote, some black people want to go back to the, or wanted to go back to the plantation after the Civil War was over. So her argument was, well, hey, since some of these black people wanted to go back to, they wanted to be slaves, I guess somehow slavery is an okay thing because they wanted it. It's very goofy defense of slavery. Okay, but she doubled down on her defense of slavery back in 2010. So people will be like, okay, well, even if that wasn't back in middle school, that was still back in 2010. Honestly, it continues. Okay, even more problematic in 2011. Okay, she wrote an article talking about how much she hated hate crime legislation. And she hated and she loved hate speech. She said, quote, she loved hate speech and made similar arguments that we hear being made on the alt-right all the time about, quote, free speech rights. So it's very she sounds very much aligned with the alt-right, alt-light, defending when somebody says I love hate speech, okay, that's a straight up red flag. Okay, there's nothing there's nothing progressive about loving hate speech. Okay, that's a very toxic view, and that honestly says something more about the person saying that than it says about free speech at all. But I'm gonna get into that whole argument in a second when I talk about social dominance theory. Okay, so that was the incident at Yale in a nutshell. So we saw we saw Lolade Siambola. She was getting really agitated in the video. She was saying that she didn't felt like she needed to prove that she belonged. She showed the police officers who showed up and were asking her a million questions while Sarah Brash was standing there in the background just watching her exercise in black population control play out in real time. Okay, saying that, hey, I have keys. She showed the police officers that she could get into her dorm room. All of that stuff. They didn't care. So that was that incident at Yale, and that went viral. Okay. Now, really quickly, I want to talk about the Airbnb incident. Okay, so you had three black people and a white woman. That and what an interesting part of this Airbnb story is that there was actually a white woman that the neighbor didn't even acknowledge when she initially called the police. Okay, there was a white woman with the three black Airbnb patrons. But when when the white neighbor called the police on the Airbnb patrons, she didn't mention the white woman at all. She just said it looked like what did she say? She was basically saying that the three she was trying to make the argument that the three black people were stealing and or engaged in theft. Okay, so she was scared because she said she saw, quote, strange people moving back and forth and they didn't wave at her. So when she acknowledged them, she didn't get the acknowledgement that she wanted from the black patrons, the Airbnb patrons. They didn't acknowledge her, they didn't wave at her, and she saw them with luggage and she assumed that they were stealing, so she called the police. So she called and reported that there were three black women stealing stuff. Okay, this neighbor completely ignored the fact that like I said, a white woman was with them, but she didn't mention that. She only mentioned the three black people. The police showed up and immediately took an antagonistic approach. Okay, when the sergeant showed up, completely took an antagonistic approach and didn't believe anything that the black Airbnb guests were saying about the situation. So as soon as the police sergeant showed up, it was assumed that the black people were guilty. Much like the Waffle House incident, the woman who owns that Airbnb location is actually defending the neighbor. Like the owner of that Airbnb location is on record stating, if they had just waved at her, none of this would have happened. There is something going on in this country right now, that a lot of people just are missing, and I think I know what it is. A lot of people just say white supremacy, and yes, that's true. Okay, that's true. It is white supremacy, but we need to apply the proper psychological foundation to what this is. And I found it. It is what is known as social dominance theory and white fragility. Now, people have talked about white fragility in the past, but you don't hear social dominance theory echoed as much. So, social dominance theory is a theory within the field of social psychology. Okay, and it's about intergroup relations. How different groups of people, white people and black people, for instance, interact with each other. Okay? So, regardless of if something that we have in common with all of these incidents, even if the incidents that I didn't talk about. So I talked about the Yale incident. I briefly talked about the Airbnb incident. I think most people know, for the most part, what happened with that. And then I talked about the Waffle House incident. All of these incidents fall under a certain category. So it's either about white people being annoyed by black people and so calling the police on black people because they feel annoyed or threatened, not because there's actually something dangerous going on, but purely because they are annoyed or threatened by the presence of black people. It's either that, or in the case of Yale, or in the case of Oakland, California, where you had a white woman call the police on black people grilling in a park a park that allows black people to grill. Okay, white people feeling that they need to exercise a certain level of control over black people and using the police as a way of doing that. Okay, there is a term that needs to be applied to this, and it is social dominance. Now, different groups respond and interact with each other differently. And it's clear that when we talk about white supremacy is really about white people as a collective, whether they are conscious or unconscious of this, interacting with other groups of people to maintain a certain level of a certain hierarchy or certain social order. Okay, social dominance theory focuses on the maintenance and stability of group-based social hierarchies. Okay, this theory suggests that inequalities that you see in society exist and are maintained through three primary intergroup behaviors. And peep this, family. When I say these three things, these three intergroup behaviors, okay, that you see within social dominance theory, these three behaviors, okay, you will see how white supremacy and white fragility are elements of social dominance theory. How when we talk about white supremacy, we are talking about social dominance theory. We are talking about social hierarchy. When we talk about why GOP voters continue to support Donald Trump when he is completely opposed to everything they say they have stood for the past 50 damn years, and how it doesn't make sense how they're supporting people like Roy Moore, how they are supporting some of the worst people that you can possibly support. They talk about draining the swamp when they support swamp things. It doesn't seem to make sense. It doesn't seem to be logical. Unless you understand that what's really going on is white people as a collective are feeling the need to enhance and support their social positioning in society. And they are doing this by supporting politicians and by supporting people, whether they be racist politicians or whether they be cops, who they feel are protecting them in their position. So here are the three behaviors that social psychologists talk about when they talk about social dominance theory. Number one, social dominance is maintained through institutional discrimination. Social dominance is maintained through institutional discrimination. Again, what is white supremacy? White supremacy is institutional discrimination, systemic racism, systematic discrimination, systematic racism. That is social dominance. Social dominance, number two, is maintained through aggregated individual discrimination, whether implicit or explicit. So when we have, check this out, when you have the white manager at Starbucks or the white Yale student, the white manager at Waffle House, when they are calling the police on black people for the dumbest possible reasons, they are engaged whether they know it or not, whether they are unconscious or using implicit bias, or whether they are conscious and using explicit bias. They are engaged in this aggregated individual racism, which is an aspect of social dominance. Because they see the police as a tool that can be used against black people to control the black population, or at least to control individual black people. This is very deep what I'm talking about here. And a lot of people don't look at this from this perspective. A lot of people look at these incidents as individual incidents, as individual acts of racism or individual acts of discrimination, individual acts of bigotry. We have to kind of look at all of this stuff as a collective. And then number three, social dominance is maintained through asymmetrical behavior from the dominant group. That is all we see, family. Meaning, the more dominant groups, i.e., in the case of America, white society, their response to problems is asymmetric or unbalanced based on who the offended group is. We see this all the time. All the time we see how white society reacts differently to all sorts of things based on who the victims and perpetrators are. This is about social dominance, of which population control is key, because you can't maintain social dominance without controlling the population of the groups, or without controlling the populations of the groups you don't want to surpass you. So let me repeat those three things, those three intergroup behaviors that make up social dominance theory. Social dominance is maintained through institutional discrimination. So things like the drug war, Jim Crow, the school to prison pipeline, mass incarceration, all of those things. It's institutional discrimination, okay? It's maintained through aggregated individual discrimination on an individual level, which is what we're seeing playing out with these individual cases of people calling police on black people. And then social dominance is maintained through asymmetrical behavior and reactions from the dominant society. Which is why when you get acts of terrorism committed by white people, that gets really very little coverage unless it goes viral on social media. That's the only way the media will talk about it. Versus when it's an act of terrorism committed by a Muslim. Then it's all hands on deck. It's wall-to-wall coverage, and they plaster that word terrorism on the scroll for the whole entire country to see. Asymmetric behavior based on who the offended group is. That is social dominance because they're trying to maintain a certain level of control by not putting more responsibility on their particular group, but putting more responsibility on other groups that don't even have as much power as they do. But if you want to maintain the power of your group, you don't want to put all of the attention and all of the onus on what your group is doing. Because you might lose some social power when you do that. Because that means you have to hold your group to a higher standard. You have to raise that bar. If you don't want anything done about police brutality, then you don't want to raise the bar and raise the standard for who we allow to become cops. You don't want to hold cops accountable. Because you're losing that ability to use the police as a proxy against the black community when you hold policing in general to a higher standard. And when you say, you know what, we want to hold cops accountable. We want to start applying the same law to cops that we apply to everyday citizens. We want to take away some of these privileges that cops have and put things on more of an even playing field. When you do that, you take away power from the dominant group, who use the police as a way to control other groups of people. Very deep. Social dominance is also about legitimizing myths. So check this out. Let me read this to you. Various processes of hierarchical discrimination are driven by legitimizing myths. So this is something social psychologists are saying. And this is something social psychologists have said. Social dominance theory was, or it's about the hierarchical discrimination behind it is driven by legitimizing myths, which are beliefs justifying social dominance, such as paternalistic myths, reciprocal myths, and sacred myths. Sacred myths like, America is the shining beacon on the hill. Sacred myths like post-racial America. You know, that's a myth. When people talk about the myth of post-racial America, or even not just the myth of post-racial America, let's talk about the myth of color blindness. That color blindness is a myth. Color blindness is really about ignoring racism. When people say that they are colorblind and they don't see race, what they're really saying is, I am actively engaged in maintaining the social hierarchy. And so I am not going to talk about racism because talking about racism, quote unquote, seeing racism means that something would have to be done about racism, meaning that the group of people that are most benefiting from racism and the social norms and the social hierarchies and the social standards of white supremacy, it means that they're going to lose some power. And people, we ignore the role that the status quo maintains and why people legitimize some of these myths. The myths of color blindness, the myths of post-racial America, all of this stuff is meant to maintain a certain status quo. Because the agenda is to not talk about race and not talk about racism in order to maintain that hierarchy and in order to maintain that dominance. So it says here, discriminatory acts such as insulting remarks about minorities, those are their words. I don't use the word minority. I'm reading from something. But discriminatory acts such as insulting remarks about minorities are performed because they increase the actor's self-esteem. Y'all see that? So again, I mentioned free speech earlier. Okay, I mentioned free speech. Actually, before I get on to that, let me read this from my notes. So when we see these things play out in American society, whether by the criminal justice system or by random citizens calling the cops on black people, we have to look at it through the prism of maintaining a certain social hierarchy. Why exactly is it so common for white people to think that other groups of people don't belong and therefore can be controlled by calling the agents of the state to come and control them? Why is that so common? Because for years, white society has been told that you have control over black people. At one point in time, social domination theory was overt. Jim Crow was an overt form of social dominance theory. But you see, after the 60s, that all changed and social dominance became very covert, and they became very coded. So this is what I wanted to say about free speech and how people use these free speech arguments. Then look at that other things and like how people are going out of their way to protect and defend white supremacist hate speech. Okay, to the extent that the mainstream media organizations are giving people like Richard Spencer major platforms to air their views, all in the name of free speech. Okay, they encapsulate this protection of white supremacy as a defense of, like I said, free speech, when in reality, it appears to me to be more about reinforcing and enhancing white dominance. The ability to air anti-black hatred on public airways, okay, that go out to millions, has to be allowed in a society that seeks to maintain a certain social hierarchy. That has to be understood. These discriminatory remarks, these hateful words, have to be echoed in order to maintain, and assuage the white fragility of white society. So when you see these people getting defended, when you see these people being given platforms, understand that is about maintaining a certain self-esteem within white society, where white people are indirectly being told, like, no, we're still in control. If we can put white supremacists like Richard Spencer on CNN, if we can do a full-page ad or a full-page expose in the New York Times or on NPR or any of these other platforms, if we can put out white supremacists to millions of people, that is still indirectly, psychologically telling many people within white society, we are still in control. We are still running shit here. This is about social hierarchy, which is why they'll give a platform to white supremacists and not to say Antifa. You don't see them putting Antifa out there like that. Why is if it's really about free speech and if it's really about a marketplace of ideas, why don't we see Antifa being given to the same platform that Richard Spencer, that neo-Nazis, and that the alt-right is being given? Why is the alt-right, why is it okay for the alt-right to be getting billions of dollars, hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in support from the Mercer family, for instance, to prop up Breitbart? And to prop up all of these right-wing, this whole right-wing echo chamber that exists online, this alt-right echo chamber that exists online, millions of dollars is being spent to prop these people up, to give these people platforms. Yet Antifa is nowhere to be seen. Independent black media is nowhere to be seen. Nobody is giving millions of dollars to push a radical black agenda. Why? I've answered that question already. Why is that? Because that goes against the social dominance. That goes against the white supremacist agenda of maintaining a certain hierarchy within society. So you literally cannot give black radicals such as myself or such as other people who might even have larger followings than I do, you literally cannot give us the same type of millions, the same type of platform that you give the Richard Spencers, that you give the Steve Bannons, that you give these other voices on the alt-right who get millions of views on a monthly basis. You literally cannot give us the same access that you give them, because that will be directly opposed to social dominance theory. And if you are engaged in making sure your group maintains dominance in American society as white people become a minority, you literally cannot give everybody a voice. So all of this talk about free speech is a bunch of BS. Because if it was really about free speech, you would be seeing black radicals being given the same platforms that the white supremacists are given. You would see Antifa have entire articles being written about them and being written about how we need to hear them out and how we need to allow them to speak on college campuses. You would be seeing all of this rhetoric for Antifa that you see for the alt-right. But guess what? You don't see that, do you? Because people are engaged in social dominance and propping up and enhancing white supremacy, and they don't even realize it. And some people might realize it, and they just don't care. Whichever one it is. It's why you'll get people who will defend white supremacists going to college campuses, and you'll even have liberals and progressives saying that they should be, quote, allowed to speak and we shouldn't protest them. Even though it is perfectly within the rights of activists on the left to protest whoever we want to protest. But if you protest them, then you're an SJW, which is the stupidest term I've ever heard in my life. But why is one group told to stand down? Why is the left being told to stand down? And the other more violent group is being given access. If we don't look at this, everything that is going on in America today that deals with racism, if we don't look at this as an active, as people being actively engaged in maintaining a certain norm through social dominance, maintaining a certain social hierarchy, if we do not look at racism from that perspective, we are missing the point. We're only going to be looking at these incidents as individual cases. We're going to be missing the forest from the trees. All right? Now, what is white fragility? White fragility is basically an insulated worldview that has been set up to maintain social dominance. Okay, let me read this definition from the International Journal of Critical Pedagogy from a scholar named Robin DiAngelo. Okay, let me read this brief description, then I'm going to be done after this. This is the abstract. It says, white people in North America live in a social environment that protects and insulates them from race-based stress. Okay, this insulated environment of racial protection builds white expectations for racial comfort while at the same time lowering the ability to tolerate racial stress, leading to what I refer to as white fragility. White fragility is a state in which even a minimum... I have this phone going off. Hold on one second. I hate streaming, and in the middle of a stream, people start calling me. See, this is why I said I'm gonna have to cut this stream short, because I have engagements plans that I have made that I have to keep. So before I end this, white fragility. Okay, it is a state in which even a minimum amount of racial stress becomes intolerable, triggering a range of defensive moves. These moves include the outward display of emotions such as anger, fear, and guilt, and behaviors such as argumentations, silence, and leaving the stress-inducing situation. These behaviors, in turn, function to reinstate white racial equilibrium. Okay, then it goes on to say this paper explicates the dynamics of white fragility. So, I think I linked that video in the YouTube. Hold on one second. The article should be on YouTube. I don't think it is, so I'm pasting it in here now. So yes, that's white fragility. So the point that I wanted to get through today, whether you look at the Yale incident, the incidents at Waffle House with Anthony Wall, Shakisha Clemens, the Airbnb incident, the Oakland incident where the family was barbecuing, all of these incidents, the Starbucks incident, all of these incidents, okay, have to be viewed from the perspective of social dominance and how certain white people in society feel the need to engage in black population control. And you cannot have white supremacy without black population control. And even so much so that I'm going to go so far as to say we can't even talk about white supremacy without talking about black population control. Black population control needs to be something that it's an aspect of this discussion that we need to be actively engaged in a lot more. Because it is integral to everything that is going on right now. Because obviously, how can you have a system of supremacy when you don't have control over other groups of people? Obviously, you have to have that control in order to maintain your system of supremacy. So, like I said, we cannot talk about white supremacy without talking about black population control, which comes in various forms. It comes through the prison system and mass incarceration. It comes through these laws, both written and unwritten. Black population control comes in the form of voter suppression, which is why they only suppress black and brown votes. They're not suppressing white votes. Unless you're talking about the Democratic primary, and that's something completely different. Okay? So once we understand this, I believe, then we have to go about finding ways of actually changing this. But that is going to be another video for another day. I am extremely pressed for time right now, so I have to actually end this stream. But definitely check me out on Twitter. @_Black Intellect. I'm going to be continuing this dialogue in the future because this is very important, along with, like I said, the system of slavery. Check out my video from last week, the system of slavery part 1, where I completely go about debunking the notion that slavery was a choice, which is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. But check out that video. It has a lot of views. A lot of people have responded positively to it. Also, check out my blog at www.blackandintellectual.com. Okay, I will see you later. And just keep all of this stuff in mind. And even do independent research. Don't take my word for anything. Look up social dominance theory. Do some research about social dominance theory and social psychology, group position theory. and understand how this stuff plays a role in white supremacy, and how what we're seeing play out in society today is a reflection of that. Okay, these are not isolated incidents. This is a group phenomenon that's actually going on here in the United States, and we need to have a discussion about it, a much more thorough discussion. So that is today's show. I love doing this because I love talking about the news and I love talking about current events. Definitely share this video, and I will talk to you later.